Today, we're diving into what's often called an ocean of text, Rabbinic literature. These are the incredible writings that came after the Hebrew Bible, shaping Judaism for thousands of years. It's a world of intense, passionate debate, and we're going to try to make some sense of it.
Okay, so let's start with a bit of a puzzle. You've probably heard stories from the Gospels where the crowds are just blown away that Jesus teaches with his own authority. But have you ever really stopped to ask yourself, why was that so shocking? I mean, what was the alternative? What was everyone else doing?
Well, as scholar Dr. Elaine Phillips puts it, speaking on your own authority was just not done. The whole expectation was that a good teacher was a link in a chain. Your job was to receive wisdom and pass it on, not to invent your own.
This was the absolute bedrock of a teacher's credibility. Your authority didn't come from being brilliant or original, it came from being a faithful part of this long chain of tradition. This idea was so common, in fact, that even the Apostle Paul uses this exact phrase, "What I received, I passed on to you," to talk about the most important things he believes.
And this wasn't just some fuzzy concept. They had it mapped out. It was this great chain that started with Moses himself at Mount Sinai. He handed the tradition to Joshua, Joshua gave it to the elders to the prophets, and on it went, down through the generations of great sages. Your authority was basically how strong your link was to this chain.
So what's holding this whole chain together? It's a foundational idea called the dual Torah. The belief is that when Moses was on Mount Sinai, he didn't just get one thing, he got two. He received the written Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, but he also received the oral Torah, which was the correct, divinely inspired way to understand and live out the written text.
And get this, for centuries upon centuries, this oral Torah was never written down. It was meant to be a living, breathing tradition passed from the mouth of a teacher to the ear of a student. It was all about memorization, repetition, and debate. But then, a massive, world-changing crisis happened.
In the year 70 CE, the Roman army completely destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was an existential catastrophe. The very center of Jewish life was gone. And in that crisis, the sages realized they couldn't risk the oral Torah being lost. It could no longer just be a memory, it had to be written down.
Just think about that for a second. The whole religion revolved around this one physical place, a specific priesthood, a system of sacrifices, and then suddenly it's all gone. How does a faith like that even survive?
Well, the answer they came up with was frankly revolutionary. The sages shifted the entire center of gravity. They rebuilt Judaism on pillars that no army could ever tear down, studying the Torah, prayer, and doing good deeds. Suddenly, the religion became portable. You could practice it anywhere. And the very first great literary achievement of this new era is a text called the Mishnah. Put together around 220 CE, this was it. The first time that massive, centuries-old oral Torah was finally written down in one comprehensive work. It became the new foundation.
But here's the really crucial part. Writing the Mishnah down didn't end the conversation. Oh no, it was like pouring fuel on the fire. The Mishnah itself became the new central text that everyone would then argue about for the next 300 years. And that gigantic, sprawling, multi-generational conversation, that is what we call the Talmud.
So, as the rabbis debated all this stuff, their discussions tended to fall into 2 main categories. You had halakha, which literally means the way to walk. This is all the legal stuff, the how-to of Jewish life. And then you had agadah, which means the telling. This is the stories, the legends, the ethics, all this stuff that explores the meaning behind it all. So let's look at a quick example of halakha in action, okay? Take this super famous line from the book of Exodus. On the surface, it sounds, well, pretty harsh, right?
So the rabbis had to ask the big question. Does this verse really mean that if someone takes out your eye, you're supposed to go and literally take out their eye in return? Or is there something deeper going on here?
And what they did next is just brilliant. It shows you their whole method. They didn't just make up a new rule. No, they treated the Torah like a giant puzzle. They found the same Hebrew wording in a different part of Exodus, but in a context where it clearly meant paying a monetary compensation or a ransom. So they made the connection. Aha, eye for an eye doesn't mean physical revenge. It means you pay the value of the eye. Justice comes through restitution.
But, and this is so important, this wasn't just one rabbi's bright idea.
This conclusion was the product of a debate that unfolded over generations, and the way they preserved that debate is maybe the coolest thing of all.
So if you look at a classic page of the Talmud, it looks like this. Right there, smack in the middle, is the original teaching from the Mishnah. Then, wrapped all around it is the Gemara. That's the centuries of debate about that teaching. And then, in the margins on the outside, you have even later commentaries from medieval times. It is literally a 1,000-year-long conversation printed on a single page.
And that, right there, is the key takeaway. Rabbinic literature is not a rule book. It's not a tidy collection of final answers. It's the record of an argument, a vibrant, ongoing, and living tradition that stays alive precisely because the argument never, ever stops.
Which leaves us with a pretty big idea to think about. After their physical center was destroyed, a whole civilization rebuilt itself. So what does it truly mean to build your home, your culture, your entire world, not out of stone and mortar, but out of sacred words and the endless, beautiful arguments about them?